Can you tell me a little bit about your own involvement with video game development? How this happened that now you're involved in this occupation, that you're making games right now?
In my case, it actually originally started in quite a young age. I was maybe 13 or 14 when I took interest in programming. And I didn't even have a computer back then. I was just experimenting with things at school. But the indie game development industry didn't exist in the way that it does today. So back then there wasn't really like an outlet or something to do with those small games that people made back then. So at some point I sort of transitioned to software and web development. When I grew up, the programming skills that I had acquired from experimenting with games and other stuff back then, they gave the foundation for software and web development as well. So that's where I spent most of my career in until about 6 years ago, when I had just quit my job in a software company. And I was looking for new things to do. I wasn't sure that I wanted to continue the career that I had so far. I mean, it was financially, it was a good career, but I just wanted a change in my life somehow.
Okay.
So I looked into different things, and at the time, my brother was trying to make a game as a hobby, and he didn't have the sort of background that I had in programming or art or anything for that matter. But I just watched him work on it, and he seemed to be doing fine, learning all the things on his own. And then I figured, like, I have all this programming experience, why not try my hand at games then? So we talked about this with my brother, and eventually we decided to create a company to pursue this career for ourselves then. And since then we've released a bunch of small free games. Most of them were made by my brother then. And I helped with some other stuff like promotion and music and such. And at the same time, I also kept working on my own game, which is called Office Management 101, which is supposed to be like our first like bigger commercial title. So that's pretty much how I got into the industry. I have never worked in any other game companies. We do some freelance work for others, but we work from home. We also, in the process, we moved to countryside from Tallinn to save on costs and make this more feasible for long term. But on the other hand, we still kind of take it like a hobby, not as a big business prospect. So we do other work on the side as well.
Okay. So is it a game-related work, or is it like other software-related things?
Depends on the time, I guess.
Okay.
Sometimes when we find game development-related clients, then we work with them. Mostly, I have still done website development for other clients. Also, we've done jobs locally here, part-time, things like that. So it's the modern kind of way to work. A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean that's true. So basically, your freelancing work is financing the game. Yeah.
Yes, basically yes.
Okay. So can you tell me about this big project, because I look it up and it looks very ambitious.
I think that part of it is sort of deceiving.
Okay.
Because often when people look at it, they think there's like a bigger company behind it, and there's like more than just me working on it. Which it is like 90% of the time.
Okay.
So I do all the art, all the programming, the music, the marketing, basically like everything.
Oh yeah, that's a lot.
But my brother also has contributed with some writing and some art in there when he has time. And there's another person, Edwin Aedma, who acts sort of like a co-producer or like a business consultant for us. But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, it's mostly me working on it. And because it's such a large project for one person, it's really been taking a long time to work on it. So most of those 6 years that I've spent developing games, I've concentrated on that one. But it has gotten quite a bit of traction online. I have a number of fans already, and it did well, gathering attention on Steam this year as well, as an unreleased game. On the other hand, we're not putting like a pressure on ourselves for it to succeed financially. As long as we're enjoying the process itself, that's like the main consideration for us.
So how did you come up with the idea for this project?
Partly because of the frustrations of the office work that I had previously.
Okay, so it's autobiographical game.
So it's kind of like the game itself. It's sort of like this dystopic version of the office life, or running a corporation. So it's like a parody, sort of a take on it. So it's like sort of hyper-capitalistic and trying to squeeze every drop out of your employees, kind of a way. So the game sort of like makes fun at that world, and that was one of the inspirations for it. But I also, at the time when I started, looked at the market and what's available, and what sort of a niche seems to be getting attention but lacking games at the time. And it seemed that this genre, what basically called tycoon games, it seemed like a good niche to make games in. Of course, a lot has happened in 6 years, and it's quite a lot more crowded in that niche as well now. But I think the art style still sort of differentiates from the other games in the genre right now. And there aren't many with this specific isometric pixel art like art style games in this genre. So that has been one of the reasons people take notice to the game, I think.
You mean the art style and the setting?
Yes. I mean, of course, there are people who will look at it and say, I hate pixel art, and that's the story for them. They don't want to look at it further. But there are definitely a lot of people interested in this specific art style as well.
So can you tell me a little bit more about your game development process? Because you said it's basically mostly you.
Yes.
Okay, so how do you feel about this?
I like it.
Okay, because this is different than your experience from, it was a corporation, yes? Where you
yeah, I never worked in like real big companies.
Okay.
And the ones that I worked at, they had maybe like 20 people working at them. Which isn't as bad as working in an environment that has hundreds of people, probably.
But now we go from 20 to 1 person.
It's definitely different, but also liberating in a way. Because the way it works for me, I wake up in the morning and then I decide what I want to do exactly. Like, maybe I decide I don't want to work today at all. Maybe I'll just go outside, take a walk, or maybe I'll just, I don't know, play games instead. So in that way, it's been really, I think, good for my day-to-day happiness. I sleep a lot more now than I used to back in a normal full-time job, for example. And of course, there are still sort of frustrations or like days when I lack motivation. So that's one of the challenging parts. And of course, also, it can be sometimes challenging when you don't really have anyone to ask like how to do something specifically, or like no one telling me, like no boss telling me what to do. I have to decide on my own.
Okay.
But overall, I am quite a bit more happier with my life now than I used to be before. Like the financials aside, I definitely used to make more money working a full-time job. But money isn't everything in life.
So you will not trade this for a better paid job? This kind of flexibility in a sense?
Not now, at least. I can't say what the future brings. Maybe someday I decide I'm done with this and I'll go back to something else. But for now, I'm liking it. Yeah.
Okay. Do you see any problems with this type of work, or any, I think, disadvantages in a sense? Or?
I think for a lot of people who get into this sort of lifestyle, they put maybe too much pressure on themselves to succeed and succeed fast. And I've tried not to do that myself, but just take things as they come, try to learn from my mistakes and not be scared of making mistakes. Try all kinds of different things and see what works for me and what doesn't. And yeah, that's one of the ways I think I've solved the problems for myself, at least.
Okay.
When dealing with again, I don't know, lack of motivations or such problems, then I also try not to pressure myself. Just accept that this is part of the whole process, and there are going to be ups and downs, and just live through them, and it's going to be okay in the end.
Okay. So, what do you think about this phenomenon of crunch that people start talking more and more in terms of not only big companies but also
it actually happens a lot to indies as well.
Yes, exactly.
And it comes back to what I was saying about putting pressure on themselves to succeed, because they think they have to do something fast, and they have to reach some level that they think they have to reach. I don't know. So they crunch because they think they have to compete in this overcrowded market.
Okay.
Or maybe because the fans are being grumpy that he's not developing fast enough. Or, there definitely are comments like that online. But I think developers have to learn to quiet those comments in their heads in a way, or like they have to put themselves first, not or their mental health or health in general first, and not whatever the project or dreams they have. But in big companies, it's quite a bit different. The why it happens.
Yeah.
And of course, I think that needs to be talked about more. It's been talked about a lot already, but it still warrants more discussions. And mostly it comes down to the management, who has to accept that this is not good for their company in long term as well. When they burn out the employees. But also, we still have to accept the fact that people are different. Some people are okay with crunch, like both mentally and physically, and it doesn't affect them the same way it affects some other people. So I guess people just have to understand themselves as well where their limits are. I definitely don't like to crunch. I don't think, but it's kind of hard to measure how many hours I work per day, though, because when it comes down to pure like game development, I probably spend like, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours a day max on that. But I also communicate with my fans on a daily basis, or I don't know, check some statistics for how the game is doing, or like all that adds up. So it's kind of hard to measure, or like where to draw the line when I'm working and when I'm just doing something for entertainment. I don't know.
Okay. So when you do something for the game, or something to promote the game, or something game related, Yeah.
But where do I draw the line? Like, is it entertaining for me, or is it just pure work?
Okay. Yeah,
so it's kind of like hard to say sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when I'm talking to to my community, for example, and I'm not even talking about the game. I'm talking about life, or talking about sports, or like whatever is the daily topic. Is that working, or is it just having a good time? So it's hard to say sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned a lot, your fans, and you're doing also marketing and promotion for your game, and you talk with your community. Can you tell me a little bit more how you formed your community, how this happened, and how you maintain connection with people who are interested in your game?
That also is very different usually when it comes to indie developers. I think I first started just blogging on a site called IndieDB, Indie Database. Just did these weekly blog posts about the progress of the game, like what has changed, and some of them were in sort of tutorial form. So that's how I started the marketing, sort of. It gained some traction there, and I think I then created a Skype group for some people that were interested in the game. Some of them were my friends from earlier, or from other avenues of life already.
Okay.
And I just gave them like these alpha, or like early prototype versions of the game to try out. And that's how kind of the community got started. And then over the years I've shifted the community from one form to another. I had a forum for a while, but that didn't really work for us. But then when Discord came along, I moved all the testers to Discord from Skype. And that has been sort of the central hub now for several years already. And last year I released a free demo of the game. And after that, I made the Discord public as well. And most of the people that are active there now came from that period. Some of them stick around for longer. Some of them are there for a shorter while and then disappear. So that's sort of like part of the I guess the long timeline that the game has had. But in addition, I've tried all kinds of things. Twitter, of course. I have a Facebook page as well. I don't really post much there. A mailing list. I've started doing Twitch streams lately. On a weekly basis, where I so far I've made either music for the game or drawn art for the game, and just some fans hop on there and they can talk to me, ask questions, or just watch how I make the game. And Steam as well has been like a good sort of way to gain some attention. When I released the playable demo, I also put up the Steam coming soon page for the game, and people can ask questions on the community page there. but they also can add the game to their wish lists. So when the game finally launches, they can Steam sends them a notification about it, that the game is out, and you should go buy it, something like that.
Okay. So how active you try to be with your fans?
Quite on Discord. I'm pretty much on every day for, I don't know, maybe like 6 to 8 hours.
Okay.
I usually have it on the background, and we talk about like all kinds of things. Not just the game. Even actually, I think it's more about other things besides the game.
Okay, so how important do you think this is? Because you said you are the only one.
Extremely, I think.
90% of things, it's on you. You're doing the game, you're alone at home, and you have your community. So how important are they to you, and how you feel about them?
I really appreciate them, having them in my life. I think for me personally, it helps boost the motivation to know that there are people out there that are looking forward to what I'm doing. But also, it's not just about the game, but the fact that they appreciate me as a person. So it helps sort of to fill some of my social needs as well. Because when you work in a normal office job, for example, you usually have colleagues around you and you can talk to them, and that's the social aspect of your life often then. But when working at home, I think for a lot of indies that can be like problematic, or like their social life suffers because of it. So of course I understand online life is not real life in a way, but it's still good to have some sort of like social communication anyway.
Okay, so do you have any suggestions for people who need to interact with their own communities, about how to interact with fans, with audiences, with players? Because this is quite crucial to promote your game in certain way.
Yeah, I think the one mistake a lot of them make is they sort of go into sales mode, where they only concentrate promoting the game and sort of with the end goal that they'll buy the game. But I think long term it's better to just be a real person and try to contribute the value to their lives somehow beyond the game itself. So just talking to them about their lives, sharing about your life and thoughts, talking about things that they're interested in general, about their hobbies, about your hobbies, things like that. And just trying to be like a real person instead of just being this nameless corporation face, kind of. Because this is one of the advantages that the indies can have. Like this more closer connection to the fans.
So you also mentioned that you're looking for at least you're looking for feedback from your community. So how do you handle the feedback on your game? Because they observe you growing and working on your stuff.
Yeah, of course, the feedback is extremely valuable, especially from long-term fans who have seen the game progress. And when they say something is off about the game, they're usually correct because they have deep knowledge about it. But on the other hand, I of course have to take into account that the way someone who has played the game a lot, the way they play it is going to be different from someone who plays it for the first time. So I have to balance the feedback from that point of view as well. And sometimes the new players have also interesting insights or things they have trouble understanding at first that maybe a more experienced player doesn't even notice anymore. But what I did with the demo that I released was to integrate a feedback form into the game itself. So when the player has thoughts about the game, he or she can just submit it right from the game, and I receive it in a sort of a platform that I made specifically for it. And I can answer them there if necessary, so they can see my answer in the game as well. But also, like I mentioned, on Discord, I get a lot of feedback there, and also on the websites where I posted the demo. So I posted it on these stores called itch.io and GameJolt. And I get some feedback from the comments on there as well. One thing to take into account, of course, is that players are not game designers. So they may notice a problem, and they're very good at noticing problems. But I have to take their suggestions for solutions with a grain of salt. They may not know some specific implementation issues that may arise from their suggestions. I usually try to talk it out with them, but sometimes it's not possible. So I just take the feedback, take notes, and try to come up with solutions then.
Do you have any emotional reaction to feedback, or you try to distance yourself from this?
I try to distance myself from it. I try to understand that any feedback that I get, both negative and positive, it's not about me, but it's about the game, at least usually. And I am not my game. We're separate entities still. So if anyone says anything negative about the game, I just accept it. They don't like it, they don't like it. Maybe sometimes I can think of ways to improve it, so I still take it into account. But in most of the cases, it's going to be a waste of everyone's time to convince someone who doesn't like the game to change his mind. So yeah, I don't get angry in general in life. So
okay.
So yeah, I think for both the positive and negative comments, I don't really let them affect me much. And even if it's about me as a person, if someone says something bad about me, or even if someone says something good about me, I do consider the feedback, but I think it matters more what I think of myself than what they do.
Okay. So I like the things that you said, that I'm not my game, because I
think for a lot of indies that becomes a problem at some point. Like they identify with the game maybe too much, and it becomes like their whole life somehow. So it can be dangerous and lead down to like these dark paths when someone says something negative about it. And there is definitely a lot of depression in indie game development as well. It's often, I see it often discussed on Twitter. And in many cases, it comes back down to the things that I mentioned earlier, when people are putting too much pressure on themselves to succeed, and when they don't, they're disappointed.
But this is kind of, maybe I'm wrong, so you can of course correct me. Very stressful life, and also people put pressure on themselves, and also very unpredictable market. So maybe this coming from this idea that I put so much into this, and I don't know if anyone will ever like my creation.
I think people just have to accept that you can't have entitlement in game development. You have to accept from the start that no matter how hard you work, it may not come to something in the end. But instead, you just have to learn to enjoy the process itself. So the day-to-day development of the game, or the other parts that are around it, if you don't enjoy it, and if you only think about the end goal, or how it's going to make you rich one day, or how everyone is going to love the game, you can't have such expectations, especially in the current market. So I think you do sort of have to go into it with the mindset that I have to be grateful for anything I get out of this, however little it is.
Okay.
And just be thankful to be able to live this sort of life in the first place. Because if you prefer a normal, like a full-time job, day-to-day, then do that instead. And if you enjoy this sort of freedom that working for yourself can give, then do that. Just find what makes you happy.